At my brother's wedding, he mocked me in his speech. My brother is a single father, unwanted by anyone. The room laughed. My mom added, he's damaged goods. Then the bride stood up and grabbed the mic. The room froze. My name is Alex. I'm 34 years old. And at my own brother's wedding, he and my mother publicly called me unwanted damaged goods in front of everyone. But before I tell you how his bride silenced the entire room and changed my life forever, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's funny, the moments that sear themselves into your memory. It's never the whole day. It's the little things. The flash of a camera, the sour smell of spilled champagne, the specific pitch of a particular kind of laughter, the kind that isn't about humor, but about cruelty. For me, the image that's burned behind my eyes is the sea of faces, all turned towards me, all wearing the same expression. A mix of pity, amusement, and a little bit of morbid curiosity. They were watching a man get filleted in public, and it was the best entertainment they'd had all night. My brother, Ethan, stood on the brightly lit stage, a microphone in one hand and a champagne flute in the other. His expensive tuxedo fit him perfectly. He had the easy, confident smile of a man who'd never known a single day of real hardship. The golden boy. He had just delivered the line that broke the dam of polite silence. The one that gave everyone permission to laugh at the family joke I never found funny. Me. My brother, Alex, he'd said, his voice dripping with mock sentimentality. Strong, independent, and clearly unwanted by anyone. The laughter that followed was a physical blow. It was sharp and loud, and it came from everywhere. And then, my mother's voice, clear as a bell from the head table, adding the finishing touch. He's damaged goods, but he still polishes up well, doesn't he? More laughter, sharper this time. I felt my 8-year-old son, Lucas, flinch beside me. His small hand, which had been clutching mine in excitement just minutes before, was now trembling. I stared down at the cheap, white tablecloth, my vision blurring. The pattern of the forks and knives seemed like the most important thing in the world. Anything to avoid looking up. Anything to avoid seeing their faces. My own family. My first thought was simple. Get Lucas out of here. Now, I was already starting to push my chair back. A quiet retreat, my only goal. I would not give them the satisfaction of a scene. I would not let my son see me break. I would just disappear. But as I moved, another sound cut through the noise. It wasn't laughter. It was the sharp scrape of a chair against the polished floor, coming from the head table. Every head in the room, including mine, snapped towards the stage. Madison, the bride, my brother's beautiful, radiant bride, was standing up. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. She walked with a purpose I'd never seen in a woman in a wedding dress. She walked right up to my brother, her husband of only a few hours, and gently, but firmly, took the microphone from his stunned hand. The room fell silent. Not a polite silence, but a sudden, heavy, dead quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the ice clinking in a glass from 50 feet away. The air crackled with tension. And then she spoke. Just one word, but it landed like a thunderclap in the stillness. Stop! Before that single word from Madison hung in the air, there were years of quiet moments that led up to it. Years of me trying and them being them. My life wasn't a sob story. It was just a life. A life I was proud of, even if it was hard. When Lucas's mother decided that being a parent wasn't for her and left when he was just 5 months old, my world imploded. For a while, it was just me and this tiny, helpless person, and the crushing weight of responsibility. I had 2 choices, crumble or build. I chose to build. That meant work. Lots of it. My days started before the sun came up. The alarm on my cheap phone would buzz at 4:30 a.m., a cruel sound in the dark stillness of our small apartment. I'd slip out of bed, careful not to wake Lucas, and get ready for my first job. The night audit shift at the Marquis Grand Hotel downtown. It was a decent place, one of those big, anonymous towers of glass and steel. The job was quiet, mostly paperwork and dealing with the occasional late-night traveler or rowdy guest. Paid the bills, or at least most of them. I remember one morning, about 2 months before the wedding, I was finishing up my shift. The sun was just starting to streak the sky orange and purple. A couple of the day shift staff were coming in, talking excitedly. "Did you hear?" A young woman named Brenda from the front desk said. "The new GM is starting today. Madison Sinclair. They say she's a real shark. Flew in from corporate in New York. I heard she fired a manager at the Chicago branch on her first day." Another guy added, his eyes wide. "Just for the way he spoke to the housekeeping staff." I barely paid attention. GMs came and went. They were gods in a world high above mine. They didn't see the guys who worked the graveyard shift, the ones who cleaned up the messes and made sure the books were balanced before the city woke up. I just grabbed my worn-out jacket, nodded to the security guard, and headed out into the cool morning air. I remember walking past a woman in a sharp, dark pantsuit who was just getting out of a black car. She had an air of authority, her eyes scanning the front of the hotel with an intense, focused gaze. We made brief eye contact. A flicker of acknowledgement, nothing more. I was just a tired guy heading home. She was someone important. I didn't give it a second thought. The drive home was my moment of peace. The city was still waking up, the streets quiet. But the peace ended the moment I walked through my apartment door. It was time for job number 2, being a dad. I'd wake Lucas up, his sleepy, warm smile making the exhaustion melt away, at least for a little while. I'd make him pancakes, the instant kind, just add water, and we'd talk about his day at school, what he was learning, who his friends were. His world was my world. He was the reason for the grind. After dropping him at the elementary school, I'd head to my second job, a morning to afternoon shift at a bustling local diner called the Daily Grind. It was the polar opposite of the hotel. Loud, chaotic, smelling of coffee and bacon. My coworker there, Maria, was my only real friend. She was a single mom too, with 2 teenage daughters. She got it. "You look like death warmed over, Alex," she said one morning, sliding a cup of black coffee across the counter to me before the morning rush started. "Feel like it?" I grunted, taking a grateful sip. Barely slept. That was the day the invitation arrived. My sister had mailed it to the diner, probably because she knew I was rarely home. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock with elegant gold script. "Ethan getting married. To a woman named Madison Sinclair." The name felt vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. "You gonna go?" Maria asked, wiping down the counter. I stared at the invitation. A part of me wanted to throw it in the trash. My family, they weren't exactly my biggest fans. To them, Ethan was the success story, the college graduate, the guy with the fancy sales job and the big commission checks. I was the cautionary tale, the one who messed up, who was tied down. "I don't know," I said honestly. "It's a long drive, and what's the point? They'll just look at me." Maria stopped wiping and looked at me, her expression serious. "Lucas has never been to a real family wedding, has he?" She was right. He hadn't. His world was small. It was just me, our tiny apartment, and school. He deserved to see what a big, happy family event looked like, even if the happiness was a facade. He deserved to feel like he belonged to something bigger. "Maybe you're right," I sighed. That night, I called my mother. It was a call I'd been dreading. "Hello?" Her voice was as crisp and cool as ever. "Hey, Mom. It's Alex. I got the invitation." "Oh, good." A pause. "So, are you coming? Or is it too much trouble?" The implication was clear. "Are you, with your complicated, messy life, going to inconvenience us with your presence?" "We'll be there," I said, forcing a cheerful tone. "Lucas is excited." "I'm sure he is," she said, her voice flat. No excitement, no warmth. "Just make sure you two are presentable. It's a very formal affair. Madison's family is quite prominent." Presentable. The word stung, as if I'd show up in dirty jeans and a t-shirt. I ended the call, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. It was the same old story. I was the family project, the one they had to tolerate. But I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for Lucas. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping. Not for groceries, not for bills, but for something special. I took Lucas to a department store at the mall. He was buzzing with excitement, running his hands over all the fancy clothes. I saw the price tag on a small, sharp-looking navy blue suit for him. It was more than I'd spent on clothes for myself in the last 5 years combined. It was nearly 2 weeks' worth of my earnings from the diner. I looked at my banking app on my phone. The number was painfully low. Rent was due next week. The car was making a weird noise again. Buying this suit was a terrible financial decision. It was irresponsible. Then I looked at Lucas. He was standing in front of a 3-way mirror, puffing out his chest, pretending to be a superhero in a blazer that was 2 sizes too big. His eyes were shining. He looked so happy, so proud. In that moment, none of the numbers mattered. Seeing that light in my son's eyes, that was priceless. I walked over to the salesman. "We'll take it," I said, my voice hoarse. As we left the store, Lucas holding the garment bag like it was a sacred treasure, he looked up at me. "Are we going to be a real family now, Dad? Like on TV?" I forced a smile, ruffling his hair. "You and me, buddy," I said. "We're already a real family." But as we walked towards the car, his words echoed in my head. I looked at the suit, a symbol of my hope, and felt a cold dread creep into my heart. I was spending money I didn't have to impress people who didn't care, all for a fantasy of a family that probably never existed in the first place. And I had no idea how right I was. The suit wasn't just a suit. It was the price of admission to my own humiliation. The day of the wedding arrived, a bright, sunny Saturday in late September. The kind of day that's supposed to be perfect. I'd taken a rare day off from both jobs. A logistical nightmare that involved a lot of begging and shift swapping. Lucas was a ball of nervous energy. He'd been wearing his suit around the apartment for an hour before we even had to leave, checking himself in every reflective surface. "Do I look handsome, Dad?" he asked, striking a serious pose. I knelt and straightened his small, crooked tie. "You look like the most handsome guy in the whole world," I said, and I meant it. In that moment, he was perfect. My hope surged back. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe seeing Lucas, seeing how well I was doing on my own, would change something in them. The drive took 2 hours, heading out of the city and into the manicured suburbs where my parents lived. The wedding was at a lavish country club, the kind of place with rolling green lawns and a valet service. As I pulled my beat-up, decade-old sedan in line behind a row of gleaming Audis and BMWs, I felt the first prickle of unease. We were out of our element. We walked into the grand foyer, Lucas's small hand gripping mine tightly. The place was dripping with flowers and crystals. My sister, Sarah, spotted us first. "Alex, you made it," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. Her eyes scanned my simple, off-the-rack suit and then Lucas. "Oh, don't you look adorable?" she said to him, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. A woman with a clipboard and a headset came over. "Alex and Lucas?" she asked. She ran her finger down a long list. "Ah, yes, you're at table 19. She pointed vaguely towards the back of the enormous ballroom. "It's over there." We walked through the maze of round tables, each one beautifully decorated with towering floral centerpieces. The tables up front were filled with loud, laughing people who all seemed to know each other. My parents, my aunts, my uncles, they were all there, at the best tables near the dance floor. They saw me. A few offered tight, little waves. No one called us over. Table 19 was in the back corner of the room, the absolute last table. It was wedged between a service door the catering staff kept swinging open and the entrance to the restrooms. Our centerpiece wasn't a towering floral arrangement. It was a single, sad-looking rose in a bud vase. The message was as clear as if it had been printed on the menu. "You are an afterthought." Lucas didn't notice. He was just excited to be there. But I noticed. I felt the familiar coldness settle in my chest. Just as we sat down, my Aunt Carol bustled over. She was my mother's younger sister, a woman who always dripped with syrupy sweetness that never felt genuine. "Alex, honey, I'm so glad you came," she gushed, pulling me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume. She pinched Lucas's cheek. "And look at this little man. So handsome. It must be so hard for you, Alex, doing it all on your own. You're a saint, you really are. Her words were kind, but her eyes were full of pity, and it felt worse than scorn. We're doing just fine, Aunt Carol, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. Of course you are, dear, she said, patting my arm. She leaned in conspiratorially. Don't mind your mother. She's just stressed. She wants everything to be perfect for Ethan. She then bustled off, heading straight for my mother's table. I watched as she leaned in and whispered something to my mother. My mother glanced back at us, a flicker of annoyance on her face, before laughing at something Carol said. The performance was complete. The kind aunt act was over. Now it was time for gossip. The ceremony was a blur. The reception started, and the speeches began. First, Madison's father, a quiet, dignified man who spoke lovingly of his daughter. Then the best man. And then it was Ethan's turn. He swaggered up to the stage, basking in the applause. He told a few charming jokes, thanked everyone for coming, and then his eyes found me in the back of the room. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. I also want to thank my family, he began. My parents, who gave me everything. And of course, I have to mention my big brother, Alex. He paused, letting the anticipation build. He's taught me so much. For instance, he's taught me what happens when you don't plan your life properly. A few nervous titters went through the crowd. I felt my face flush hot. But hey, Ethan continued, raising his glass in a mock toast. I have to hand it to him. He's a survivor. My brother, Alex. Strong, independent, and clearly unwanted by anyone. The laughter that erupted was deafening. It wasn't just a few titters now. It was a full-throated roar. My own family, my aunts and uncles, were laughing the loudest. I saw my father, Richard, give a weak, uncomfortable smile, looking down at his plate. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He never did. And then, my mother's voice, loud and proud, cut through the noise. He's damaged goods, but he still polishes up well, doesn't he? That second wave of laughter was what broke me. It was so callous, so utterly devoid of humanity. This wasn't a joke. This was a public execution of my worth as a person. They were telling the world that I was less than, broken, a failure. All my fragile hope, all the reasons I'd come, shattered into a million pieces. The expensive suit, the long drive, the hope for a different outcome. It was all a fool's errand. I had willingly walked into my own ambush. But the worst part wasn't my own humiliation. It was the small, trembling voice beside me. Dad. I looked down at Lucas. His face was pale, his bottom lip quivering. His big, innocent eyes were filled with a confusion so profound it felt like a physical stab wound to my heart. Dad, he whispered, his voice cracking. Why are they laughing at you? What did you do wrong? That was it. That was the moment the shame and hurt turned into something else. Cold, protective fury. They could do whatever they wanted to me. They could mock me, belittle me, cast me aside. But they would not do it in front of my son. They would not teach him that his father was someone to be laughed at. I made a decision. No scene. No shouting match. That would only prove them right. I would leave with the only thing I had left. My dignity. I leaned down and looked my son straight in the eye. I didn't do anything wrong, buddy, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Sometimes people are just unkind. Come on, let's go home. I stood up and helped him out of his chair. As I was about to turn and walk away, to just fade into the background as I always had, Ethan, still on the stage, saw me moving. Hey, where are you going? He called out, a smirk on his face. Can't handle a little family ribbing? The party's just getting started. He expected me to shrink, to hurry away in shame. But Lucas's question still echoed in my ears. What did you do wrong? I stopped. I turned my head, not my whole body, just enough to look at him over my shoulder. And in a voice that was low but carried in the sudden lull, I said, never speak about me like that in front of my son again. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. A line drawn in the sand. A flicker of surprise, then anger, crossed Ethan's face. The air grew thick with unspoken tension. And it was in that charged silence that the scrape of another chair from the head table cut through the room. The moment that changed everything. Time seemed to slow down. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, oppressive silence. My words to Ethan still hung in the air, a challenge he hadn't expected. The smirk was gone from his face, replaced by a flash of genuine anger. He wasn't used to being defied, especially not by me. I held his gaze for a second longer, then turned my back on him, on all of them. My only focus was the small hand in mine. Lucas was looking up at me, his eyes wide. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. He understood that his father had just stood up for himself. My plan was still the same: get to the exit. Each step felt like wading through mud. I could feel the weight of hundreds of pairs of eyes on my back. I could hear the whispers starting up, like the rustling of dry leaves. That's when I saw her move. Madison. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the blur of white. She was standing now. I didn't stop, didn't look back. It had nothing to do with me. It was probably just the bride getting up to talk to a guest, to smooth over the awkward moment her new husband had created. But then I heard her shoes on the polished dance floor. A determined, rhythmic click-clack that was getting closer. It wasn't the sound of someone mingling. It was the sound of someone on a mission. I risked a glance back. She wasn't walking towards a guest. She was walking directly towards the stage, directly towards Ethan. In that moment, a strange memory surfaced. A memory so fleeting I'd almost forgotten it. That morning, months ago, outside the Marquis Grand. The woman in the power suit getting out of the black car. The intense, scanning eyes. The brief, anonymous eye contact. Madison Sinclair, the new GM. The name on the wedding invitation. It clicked into place with a sudden, gut-wrenching lurch. It wasn't just a similar name. It was her. The bride, the woman my brother was marrying, was the new general manager of the hotel where I worked the graveyard shift. My blood ran cold. This was a catastrophe. My brother hadn't just humiliated me in front of my family. He had humiliated me in front of my new, notoriously tough boss. My job. The job that paid my rent and put food on our table. He had potentially destroyed my entire life without even knowing it. The urge to flee became a desperate, primal need. Quicken my pace, pulling Lucas along. Just get to the door, Alex. Just get out before she sees you, before she makes the connection. But it was too late. As she reached the stage, Madison's eyes swept the room. They weren't the soft, happy eyes of a bride. They were the sharp, analytical eyes of the woman I'd seen outside the hotel. They scanned past the front tables, past my parents' shocked faces, and they found me. In the back of the room, near the exit. Our eyes locked. And this time it wasn't a fleeting, anonymous glance. This time, I saw a flicker of recognition in her expression. It was a look that said, "I know you." My stomach plummeted. She knew. She knew I was the guy from the night shift. The guy whose file she had probably read. And then, another memory even fainter surfaced. A brief commendation in a company-wide email a few weeks back. An employee had calmly and professionally handled a medical emergency with a guest at 3 a.m., keeping the situation under control until paramedics arrived. The employee's name was Alex. My name. I'd been proud of it for a day, then forgot about it. It was just part of the job. Did she remember that? Or did she only see the man her new husband had just labeled damaged goods? Just then, something else happened that made the situation even worse. A flashback. Not my own, but one I could almost feel coming from her. I saw it in the way her jaw tightened, the way her gaze on my family at the front table turned from confusion to a cold, hard anger. I could almost hear the echo of a different insult, from a different time. I saw a younger version of Madison, standing beside her own father, a kind-looking man in a simple, honest suit, while someone from her mother's wealthy family looked down their nose at him, calling him a simple man who didn't belong. It was a flash of intuition, a sudden gut-level understanding. She wasn't just mad as a boss. She wasn't just mad as a decent human being. This was personal. She reached Ethan, who looked utterly bewildered. He tried to smile, to offer her the microphone back. "Honey, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice a nervous whisper. She didn't answer him. She just took the microphone. Her movements were calm, deliberate. She turned to face the crowd. Her back was to me now, but I could feel the energy in the room shift, coalescing around her. The whispers died. The shuffling stopped. Every single person in that ballroom was holding their breath, waiting to see what the bride would do next. I was frozen by the door, my escape forgotten. I was no longer just a spectator at my own humiliation. I was about to become the center of a storm I couldn't have imagined in my wildest nightmares. Madison stood on that stage, a vision in white against the backdrop of gaudy floral arrangements. But there was nothing soft about her. She held the microphone not like a bride about to give a toast, but like a judge about to deliver a verdict. The silence in the room was absolute. My own breathing sounded loud in my ears. Lucas had stopped pulling on my hand and was now just staring, captivated by the woman on the stage. Madison's eyes, cold and clear, swept across the front tables where my family sat, their faces a mixture of confusion and apprehension. Then she began to speak. Her voice was not loud, but it was so clear and sharp that it cut through the silence like a shard of glass. "I think," she said, her voice steady and controlled, "that there has been a serious misunderstanding here tonight about the definition of a few words. Words like value, strength, and success." A nervous cough came from my father's table. My mother, Judith, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, a brittle smile frozen on her face. She still thought this could be salvaged. Ethan reached for Madison's arm, a pleading look on his face. "Maddie, what are you doing?" he hissed. She ignored him completely, her focus entirely on the audience. "My husband," she said, and the word husband sounded foreign, clinical, "just gave a speech. He talked about his success. This beautiful wedding, his great job, the support of his wonderful family." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "And then, he talked about his brother, Alex." She turned her head slightly and her eyes found me again, standing by the door. It wasn't a look of pity. It was a look of acknowledgement, a look that saw me. "He called him unwanted. His own mother," she continued, her voice dropping a little, taking on a dangerous edge, "called him damaged goods. And you all laughed." This time, the silence was laced with shame. People started looking down at their plates, at their hands. The festive atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by the suffocating tension of a courtroom. "Let me tell you what I see," Madison said, her voice rising with controlled power. "I don't see damaged goods. I see a man who was abandoned, left to raise a son on his own. I see a man who works two jobs he works with integrity and dedication, to give that son the best life he possibly can. I see a man who, despite years of being belittled and dismissed by the very people who should have supported him, still put on a suit and brought his son here tonight to celebrate his brother's happiness. That isn't weakness. That isn't failure. That is a strength that none of you at that front table could possibly comprehend." A collective gasp went through the room. My mother's face had gone from confused to ashen. The brittle smile was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed look of horror. Ethan looked like he'd been physically struck. He was pale, sweating under the stage lights. But Madison wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. This is where the night took a turn no one, least of all me, could have ever predicted. "You see, my family comes from humble beginnings," Madison said, her voice now softer, more personal, but no less powerful. "I've seen good men get looked down on by people with more money and less character. So I have a bit of an allergy to bullies. I also happen to be a businesswoman." She looked directly at my parents. "And in my business, we have a name for people like Alex. We don't call them damaged goods. We call them assets." Then, she delivered the final, devastating blow. "My name is Madison Sinclair. I am the new general manager of the Marquis Grand Hotel." The gasp this time was audible, a wave of shock that rolled through the entire ballroom. I could see the frantic calculations in the eyes of my family members. The pieces were clicking into place for them, just as they had for me moments earlier, but the result for them was not fear, but utter catastrophe. The hotel, Madison continued, her voice now like ice, where Alex works the night shift, and I can tell you from his file, which I have read, and from a commendation he received just last month for his professionalism and grace under pressure, that he is the exact kind of employee we build our brand around. He is dedicated, he is honorable, and he is a man of immense character. She turned her gaze to Ethan, and for the first time, she addressed him directly. Her voice was devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of a CEO cutting a failed investment loose. You didn't just mock your brother, Ethan. You mocked one of my best employees. You stood up here and you celebrated cruelty as entertainment. You laughed at kindness and called it weakness. She took a small step back from him. I looked at you and I thought I saw a partner, a man of character, but I was wrong. You are not the man I thought you were. And I cannot, and will not, marry into a family that mistakes cruelty for strength. And with that, she did the most shocking thing of all. She reached up, and with a single decisive pull, she took off the ridiculously expensive diamond ring from her finger. She didn't throw it. She didn't make a scene. She simply placed it carefully on the podium. I believe this belongs to you, she said. Then, she turned her back on him on the stage on the entire wedding. She walked down the steps, her head held high, and she walked straight through the stunned crowd. She walked right towards me. When she reached us, she stopped. She knelt so her eyes were level with Lucas's. The fierce GM was gone, replaced by a woman with a gentle, sad smile. Your dad, she said to him, her voice soft, is the strongest person in this room. Don't you ever forget that. Lucas, who had been watching in silent awe, just nodded, his eyes shining. Madison stood up and looked at me. There were a million things I wanted to say, but no words came out. I just nodded, a wave of gratitude so overwhelming it felt like I was drowning. She gave me a small, sad smile, and then she walked past us, out the double doors of the ballroom, and out of my brother's life forever. The wedding was over, and my life, as I knew it, had just been completely and irrevocably changed. The moment the doors swung shut behind Madison, the spell was broken. The silent, frozen tableau exploded into chaos. A roar of confused, shocked, and angry chatter filled the room. People were standing up, turning to their neighbors, their faces a canvas of disbelief. Ethan was still on the stage, a statue of humiliation. He stared at the diamond ring on the podium as if it were a venomous snake. His face had crumpled, the confident smirk replaced by the terrified, confused look of a child who had just broken his favorite toy and knew he was in deep, deep trouble. My mother, Judith, was the first to react. She shot up from her chair, her face a mask of fury and panic. Ethan! She shrieked, her voice shrill, but he didn't seem to hear her. I knew this was my cue. This was my window to finally leave. I had no place here anymore, if I ever did. I tightened my grip on Lucas's hand and turned towards the exit. As we moved, I noticed a man at a nearby table quickly putting his phone away. He had been recording the entire thing. Madison's speech, my family's stunned faces, her dramatic exit. At the time, I just registered it as another strange detail in a surreal night. I had no idea that his recording was a little digital time bomb, about to detonate across the internet and send shockwaves far beyond the walls of this country club. We were almost at the doors when a hand clamped down on my shoulder. I flinched and turned. It was my father, Richard. His face was pale and sweaty. For the first time in years, he was looking me directly in the eye, and what I saw there wasn't anger. It was fear. Alex, wait, he pleaded, his voice raspy. Don't go. We can fix this. You have to talk to her. Tell her it was all a misunderstanding. A joke. Behind him, my mother was barreling towards us, her face contorted with rage. You! She spat at me, completely ignoring my father. This is all your fault. You and your pathetic little life. You couldn't just stay in the background. You had to ruin everything. It was so absurd. so completely twisted that I almost laughed. I had done nothing but exist. I had done nothing but endure their scorn in silence until they pushed me too far in front of my son. And now, I was the one to blame. "Mom, stop," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Don't you, Mom, stop me," she screeched, jabbing a finger at my chest. "You heard what she said. She's your boss. You have to fix this. You have to go after her and apologize. You have to tell her you overreacted." Lucas cowered behind my leg, and that was the last straw. The years of quiet resentment, of swallowed anger, of feeling like I was less than, finally coalesced into a single point of cold, hard clarity. I looked from my hysterical mother to my weak, pleading father, and I felt nothing. The old hurt was gone. The old need for their approval was gone. They were strangers to me, strangers who happened to share my blood. "Apologize," I said, my voice low and even. "Apologize for what? For being the man she just described? For working hard? For raising my son? No." I gently moved Lucas so he was standing behind me, shielding him from her venom. "I have spent my entire life shrinking myself to make you too comfortable," I said, my gaze locking onto my mother's. "I have listened to the jokes. I have tolerated the insults. I have accepted the role you gave me as the family failure so Ethan could be the golden boy. And I did it because I thought, somewhere deep down, you were still my family." I shook my head slowly. "But tonight you showed me who you really are. You didn't just insult me. You insulted my son. You tried to teach him that his father is worthless. And that is something I will never forgive." My mother opened her mouth, a torrent of excuses and blame ready to spill out. "You are always so dramatic. After everything we've done for you, you should be begging us for help, not standing here acting so high and mighty." Her words were a chaotic jumble of self-pity and rage, but in them, I heard the real truth. It wasn't about me failing. It was about me not failing. It was about the fact that I had survived on my own, and they couldn't stand it. "I'm not acting," I said, my voice final. "I am done. Done being your punching bag. Done being your cautionary tale. Done being your son, if this is what it means." I looked at my father one last time. "You could have stopped this, Dad. Years ago. Tonight. You never did." I saw a flicker of shame in his eyes before he looked away. As always, without another word, I turned, took my son's hand, and walked out of the ballroom. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I walked with my head held high, leaving the ruins of my brother's wedding and the wreckage of my old family behind me for good. The cool night air on my face felt like the first breath of a free man. The month that followed was the strangest of my life. The first few days were a blur of adrenaline and uncertainty. I fully expected to get a call from the Marquis Grand's HR department, telling me my services were no longer required. How could I possibly continue to work at a place so connected to the single most humiliating and dramatic night of my life? But the call never came. Instead, something else happened. The video the guest had recorded went viral. It started on a local community Facebook page, then got picked up by a news aggregator, then another. The headline was always some variation of, "Bride dumps groom at altar after he humiliates his single-dad brother." My phone started buzzing with notifications. Friends I hadn't heard from in years were sending me messages of support. But it was the comments from strangers that floored me. Thousands of them. Single parents, people from toxic families, people who had been bullied. All of them sharing their own stories, all of them cheering for me and for Madison. They called her a hero. They called me a great dad. For the first time, I didn't feel like an island. I felt seen. About a week after the wedding, I got an email. The sender was Madison Sinclair. The subject line was simply, "Meeting." My heart hammered in my chest as I walked into her office the next day. It was a large corner office with a stunning view of the city, a world away from the windowless break room of the night shift. She stood up as I entered, not in a wedding dress, but in the same kind of sharp, professional suit I'd first seen her in. "Alex," she said, her voice warm but professional. "Please sit down. Thank you for coming. Thank you for, well, for everything." I stammered, feeling awkward and out of place. I want to be very clear about something, she said, leaning forward. What I did at the wedding was personal. It was about right and wrong. This meeting is professional. She slid a file across the polished desk towards me. It was my employee file. I didn't just read your file after the wedding, Alex. I had already flagged it before I even knew who you were. Your performance reviews are flawless. Your attendance is perfect. And the commendation for how you handled that medical emergency in the lobby, that showed leadership potential. You kept a cool head in a crisis. She paused, her gaze direct. I didn't offer you a promotion because I felt sorry for you. I'm offering you a promotion because you've earned it. The position of night shift supervisor is open. It's a leadership role. More responsibility, better pay. And it's the first step on a management track if you want it. I was speechless. I just stared at her. Promotion. A real career path. Not because of a viral video or a dramatic rescue, but because of my work. Because of the long nights, the extra effort, the quiet dedication no one in my family had ever bothered to see. Yes, I finally managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. Yes, I want it. Life began to change quickly and dramatically. The new salary meant I could finally quit my job at the diner. For the first time since Lucas was born, I had one job. I could be home in the evenings to help him with his homework. I could make it to his school events. We moved out of our cramped, run-down apartment and into a small but bright two-bedroom place in a better neighborhood, with a small park right across the street. My first team meeting as a supervisor was terrifying. I stood in front of a half-dozen people who were used to seeing me as their peer, and I felt like an imposter. But then I remembered Madison's words, "You've earned it." I took a deep breath, looked at my notes, and began to speak. And it was okay. I knew the job, I knew the people, and I knew what needed to be done. I earned their respect not by being a boss, but by being fair and listening, just as I had always done. About a month after I started the new role, Ethan showed up at my new apartment. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. The golden boy confidence was gone, replaced by a desperate, haunted look. He stood awkwardly at my door. "Can I come in?" I let him in, and he stood in the middle of my new living room, looking around. "Mom and Dad are a mess," he said, not looking at me. "The video, everyone saw it. Dad's clients at the firm are asking questions. Mom's friends from the club are shunning her. It's bad." He was here to talk about them, of course. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it, but it felt distant, like hearing about a problem in another country. I'm sorry, Alex," he finally mumbled, his eyes on the floor. What I said, it was a stupid joke. I was drunk. I never meant for all this to happen. It was the apology of a man who was sorry he got caught, not sorry for what he did. He wasn't sorry for the years of cruelty, only for the public consequences of one night. I looked at my brother, this man I had once idolized and then resented, and I felt a flicker of the old pity. Not for me, but for him. He had everything, and yet he had nothing. "I need time, Ethan," I said quietly. A lot of time. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't an embrace. But it wasn't a slammed door either. It was the truth. He nodded, looking relieved that I hadn't screamed at him, and left a few minutes later. I didn't know if our relationship could ever be repaired. But I knew that for the first time it would have to be on my terms. The power dynamic had shifted forever. I was no longer the one looking for a seat at their table. I was busy building my own. It's been 6 months since the wedding that wasn't. Life has found a new rhythm, a quiet, steady beat that feels more real than anything I've known before. The viral fame has faded, the calls have stopped, and what's left is just life. A good life. I came home from my shift last night, a little tired but satisfied. The job is challenging, but I'm good at it. The respect I get from my team is a quiet affirmation that I'm in the right place. As I walked into the apartment, Lucas came running out of his room, his face alight with a conspiratorial grin. "Dad, close your eyes," he ordered. I smiled and did as I was told. I heard the scuff of his sneakers and the rustle of what sounded like construction paper. Okay, open them. I opened my eyes. On the small kitchen table, where we ate our meals every night, sat a trophy. It was a magnificent wobbly creation made from a toilet paper roll, a plastic cup, and a ton of glitter glue. On a piece of paper taped to the front, in bright red crayon, were the words, "World's #1 Dad." He looked up at me, his eyes shining with pride, waiting for my reaction. All the words caught in my throat. The promotion, the new apartment, the respect from my colleagues. All of it was wonderful. But this clumsy, glitter-shedding, homemade trophy? This was everything. This was the only validation I had ever truly needed. I knelt and pulled him into a fierce hug, burying my face in his hair. He smelled like crayons and boyish energy. "It's the best trophy I've ever seen, buddy," I whispered, my voice thick. "Thank you." Later that evening, after he was asleep, I stood by the window of our living room, looking out at the quiet park across the street. For years, I had been chasing a ghost, the approval of a family that was incapable of giving it. I had measured my self-worth against their broken ruler, always coming up short. The humiliation I felt at that wedding was the most painful thing I've ever experienced. But in a strange way, it was also a gift. It wasn't an ending. It was a violent, necessary, and liberating beginning. It shattered the chains of obligation and false hope that had bound me for so long. I am not damaged goods. I am not unwanted. I am a father. I am a supervisor. I am a man who, when knocked down, learned to stand up, not with a fist, but with quiet dignity. My family is not the one I was born into, but the one I come home to every night. It's a family of two, built on a foundation of love, respect, and a whole lot of pancakes. And it is more than enough. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to redefine what family means to you? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.